The ceiling has never been higher for sports bettors, which is crazy to think of when we've been here through the whole run of it, but it's true. Like it or not, prediction markets raise the ceiling for everyone.
Welcome once again to Low Rollers, the weekly gambling industry podcast presented by CasinoReports.com in partnership with DraftKings Casino. I'm Eric Raskin, the senior editor of Casino Reports and other fine Third Planet media sites, and I'm just going to get a Casino Reports plug-in here right off the bat. In case you've missed it, this week we've been rolling out a 5-part investigative series by Brian Joseph called Compliance Confidential, digging into the anti-money laundering saga in Las Vegas that involved bookie Matthew Boyer and several major casinos and VIP programs and people turning a blind eye. 4 parts plus an intro have already published. The 5th part, titled No Comment Inside the Gaming Industry's Wall of Silence, publishes Friday morning along with an epilogue featuring Joseph's reflections on pursuing the story. The whole series is very well done. I can't recommend it enough. Check it out if you've missed it. I guarantee you'll learn a few things about this whole messy situation. And speaking of learning a few things, coming up in just a couple of minutes, I will be joined by one of Low Roller's favorite returning guests, Captain Jack Andrews. Jack is just back from being treated like a celebrity at BetBash, so we'll talk about this year's event at Circa in Las Vegas, the launch of the Sports Traders Union, what's new at Unabated, card counting, and other more modern forms of advantage play. Plus, this lactose-intolerant pescatarian engages Jack on the topic of Philly cheesesteaks. But before I bring on Jack, and before I monologue about this week's news, I want to tell you about DraftKings Casino. A big thank you to DraftKings Casino for sponsoring Low Rollers. DraftKings Casino, now the home of Lightning Link High Stakes, one of the world's most popular slot games. I've been dabbling in it myself, chasing those 6 coin symbols to get the hold and spin bonus feature, or even better, the 3 gold suitcases to get you the 6 free spins with the 1 giant reel in the middle. Here's the deal. New players just need to make a minimum of $5 in wagers, and they get 1,000 spins, including 500 Lightning Link spins. So, new casino players, strike now to land this exclusive Flex Spins offer only at DraftKings Casino. For the promotion, you must be 21 years of age, physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or West Virginia. Void in Canada. Eligibility restrictions apply. 1 per new DraftKings Casino customer. Opt-in required. Spins issued as 50 spins per day upon login for 20 days. Game availability may vary. Offer ends August 23rd. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Okay, you may have seen this week that 3 elected officials, Senator Richard Blumenthal and Representatives Paul Tonko and Valerie Foushee, sent a letter to Major League Baseball and the Players Association demanding an end to MLB players participating in a, quote, predatory promotion, specifically referring to a FanDuel VIP host having Bryce Harper record a cameo message as a perk for a customer struggling with gambling addiction. This is utterly asinine. Just total nonsense from Blumenthal, Tonko, and Foushee. And by the way, I think regular listeners know my political leanings. I am usually not going to go out of my way to smear Democrats, but, you know, sometimes they deserve some smearing, and this is one of those times. Blumenthal, Tonko, and Foushee are all Democrats, and clearly, all 3 of them have no idea what they're talking about here. I think they're right to observe that VIP programs sometimes go over the line, and we know of some infamous examples of VIP hosts exploiting vulnerable problem gamblers. I also think it's fair to wonder, in this case, at what point the VIP host at FanDuel could have or should have known this gambler had a problem. But that's all beside the point here. The point here is, what the hell is MLB supposed to do about it? What Bryce Harper did here is film a quick cameo video to a fan that was paid for by FanDuel. Maybe he should have known better than to read copy that mentioned a gambling company. But otherwise, he did nothing wrong. He didn't encourage this guy to gamble. He didn't knowingly promote a sportsbook. He just filmed a cameo, the same way he would wish some grandma who's a Phillies fan a happy 80th birthday. The senator and the 2 representatives want to prohibit promotional deals between players and gambling operators? Okay, Fine. But this wasn't a promotional deal. Harper apparently charges about $900 for a cameo. You think Bryce Harper would sign a promotional deal with any company for $900? His shoe deal is worth $1 to $2 million a year. That's his rate for promotional deals, not $900. $900 is what he charges for 60 seconds of talking to a fan, which is what he thought he was doing here. To all Congress people, I say, you have more important things to do with your time than write angry letters to MLB. But if you're going to waste your time on an angry letter to MLB, at least make sure you know what you're talking about. And by the way, there's a lockout coming, so not only should the Congress people have bigger fish to fry, but MLB and the MLBPA do also. Okay, let's get to the interview, which, by the way, spoiler, also involves a little bit of chatter about star athletes who play in Philadelphia. Please enjoy a few seconds of music, and when I come back, I will be joined by my captain, your captain, the captain, Captain Jack Andrews. I cannot promise that he will get you high tonight. I cannot promise that he will take you to your special island, but I can promise a corny introduction that will mildly amuse all of the Billy Joel fans in the audience. Captain Jack Andrews is here, professional bettor, co-founder of Unabated, longtime friend of the show, fresh off a Vegas trip for BetBash. Jack, thanks for joining me again on Low Rollers.
Oh, Eric, always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for that intro.
So let's start with the most important topic, per our recent Twitter digression. What is Captain Jack's recommended Philly cheesesteak joint, and how does Captain Jack order his cheesesteaks?
I'm a Jim's guy. I used to work in Center City, and there was a Jim's there, although the original Jim's was down on South Street. That was kind of my go-to. I'm not a fan of the fried onions, so it's never going to be with. And I'm not a fan of a seeded roll. For whatever reason, don't like a seeded roll, which a lot of the newer ones have. And my other take is I'm okay with whiz, but I prefer American or Cooper Sharp.
All right. I don't know if you know of my various dietary restrictions, some by choice, some not. But I used to love a good cheesesteak. And when I did, Jim's on South Street was the only Jim's that I knew of. And so that was my place. But my body decided 10 years or so ago that cheese was off limits for me. And then I decided not too long after that I was done with beef. So cheesesteaks really aren't my thing anymore. But I do love the onions, actually. That I would maintain a passion for and always put the onions on my cheesesteak when I did order them. So.
Well, I'll pick mine off and you can have them.
There you go. All right.
Anyway.
All right. Let's talk BetBash. I believe this is the 6th year of BetBash and the 5th in Vegas. I heard our friends on the Prime Suspects podcast say this was the best BetBash yet. Do you agree? Was it? If so, why? What made this year different from previous years?
It's an exciting time for sports bettors. The ceiling has never been higher for sports bettors, which is crazy to think of when we've been here through the whole run of it. But it's true. Like it or not, prediction markets raise the ceiling for everyone. And to the point where, Eric, you know, I go to SBC, I go to G2E, I go to all the trade shows. There were guys that were sniffing around BetBash that I see at G2E and at SBC, and I know they're the money guys. They're the VC guys. They're the guys with the deep pockets. They're looking at the bettors now. They're looking at investing in betting syndicates. Some of these betting syndicates are going to have incredible valuations. It's a very frothy time in our very frothy industry. So that's what makes it so exciting is year after year, you see the tenor change at BetBash, and it goes from people that are just looking to avoid limiting at the major recreational books to now guys that are looking for COOs for their startup companies that are all related to market making in sports betting.
Were the actual conference scheduled events, the panels and the various networking events, were they different from usual? I guess, more of a prediction market bent in everything going on there. I'm trying to identify why some people were saying this was the best BetBash ever. Was it about the event, or is it just like you were saying that there was this sort of rush of interest in all things prediction markets that just elevated it?
Like any trade show, the meat of what happens actually happens away from the show. It happens on the fringes. And to be honest with you and be transparent, there wasn't a lot of talk about prediction markets in the seminars and panels because, quite frankly, we're hosted at Circa. Derek Stevens is the head of the Nevada Resorts Association, which they are a named party against Kalshi in the Ninth Circuit. So he prefers not to have a lot of talk in public spaces about prediction markets. Spanky obliges as best he can. Doesn't mean the talk is not there at the bar, at the pool, everywhere else around the property.
That's sort of the idea of, I've never been to a BetBash yet, hopefully one of these days, but I've been to some of these other conferences that you've referenced, and the last couple of years, prediction markets are a huge topic of conversation, even on the panels, although not one for one with how much of a topic of conversation they are otherwise, but it's a very anti-prediction market crowd at the regular conferences. It sounds like there's a bit of a polarization here. Nevada doesn't care for prediction markets, and Circa may not care for prediction markets, but I assume most of the attendees are very pro-prediction markets. Was there sort of a tension at all between the factions?
I'm not sure I want to comment too much about that because I don't want to put thoughts into other people's heads. But yes, there's absolutely a Hatfields versus McCoys when it comes to state-regulated markets and the federally regulated markets. And unfortunately, that's just the dichotomy we're in because everyone's thinking about the money. So, the states want to protect their tax revenue. The state-regulated operators want to protect against cannibalization. We don't know for certain if there is or isn't cannibalization, depending on who you talk to. And of course, the new prediction markets, they finally have a way to get their product to market. And these are guys I've known for close to 10 years now, since when they were fresh out of college. Alex Kane, Dean Sisson, Jake from Profit. They've been struggling to get this to the market for so long. And now they finally have a chance, and it's a grand chance. So the stakes are high. And for the sports bettor, which is the faction that I represent de facto, I just want to be able to do what I want to do and do what I'm good at. And the ceiling for me has never been higher as well. So I see the tide lifting all boats, but not everyone sees it that way.
So the ceiling for you being higher now than ever, it's interesting to sort of compare with the 2018 launch where all the sportsbooks were just throwing bonuses at you. Can you actually make more in a year betting with the prediction markets than you could in like that first year where you could sort of take advantage of all the bonuses? When you say ceiling, is it more just like that this is sustainable, whereas the bonuses dry up?
It's a little bit of that, but it's also the money is much greater. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school to say that there are many people I know making 7 figures a month now, market making on prediction markets. And we're getting more and more prediction markets, which causes competition, which causes innovation, and it keeps getting better. The CFTC sometimes makes some rules that are good, and sometimes, like they did this past weekend, where they say you can't use American odds anymore because people might confuse that with sports betting, and we don't want people sports betting. It's kind of comical, right? But it's absolutely a brave new world and industry, and there are a lot of guys that have worked very hard to be able to get money down in sports betting markets for years that finally have that opportunity. And they're kind of showing just how good they are. They're kind of showing that when they're the bookie, when they're the market maker, they can print money in ways that DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, Caesars never seem to be able to. Now, they have marketing drag and they have other frictions, but it's really amazing to show that, when the smart people that are on this side of the counter get to actually make markets, they crush.
Did you do the speed dating at BetBash this year? Did you participate in that?
So I did part of it. And the reason I only did part was I was conducting 10 interviews, video interviews that I'm going to have out on our Unabated YouTube channel later in the next month or two. And I needed to save my voice because speed networking is notoriously really tough on your voice. But one of the people that I had early up on my list that I had definitely wanted a meeting with is a regulator from Colorado. There are various regulators that come to BetBash to just kind of see what these bettors really think. And I think they all come in with the preconceived notion that there's going to be a bunch of guys that complain about being limited. We've moved past that. We're unlimited now in prediction markets. So we're not so concerned about limits anymore. So when he was like, let me hear your concerns, and I was talking more about, taxes and things like that, he was kind of shocked that it wasn't about limits. But, and look, Colorado had a chance to regulate some sort of exchange type betting, and they chose not to. So they kind of know what it is like, and hopefully they're going to see the money that they potentially missed out on.
So I was curious with whether in the speed dating or just in generally observing, was this the youngest average age of BetBash attendees that you've ever seen? Because that was something else they talked about on Prime Suspects, that it seems to be a lot more early 20s types of people now descending upon Vegas for this.
It gets younger every year. It absolutely does. And I always feel a little older every year, but especially this year. It had a very Wall Street, mid-'80s connotation, a lot of money being thrown around. It's not my scene in that sense. But yeah, it does get younger every year.
I'm almost like waiting for you to deliver the Wooderson line from Dazed and Confused. You keep getting older and these BetBash attendees keep staying the same age, or something creepy like that. But I won't. I ended up saying it, so you don't have to actually put those creepy words directly in your own mouth, I suppose. I'm curious, do you find any time while you're out there to make any casino advantage plays when you're in Vegas for a week? Is that still on your agenda?
Not as much, because I know I have eyes on me the whole week. So everywhere I go, somebody stops and wants to talk. And I jokingly said to my wife when I was getting ready to fly home, I said, I want to go home and not be so famous for a week. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but this is my people. So I don't want to give up plays by sitting at a certain machine or doing something in the casino. So I tend to bet pretty much on the square during the BetBash week.
Okay. One bit of news that came out of BetBash, the announcement of the launch of the Sports Traders Union, for which you're on the advisory board. I believe you've had involvement with similar efforts in the past, or at least one that you and Rufus were discussing that I think never quite launched. Anyway, what is the story behind Sports Traders Union? Why this? Why now? How did this come together?
So I was approached about Sports Traders Union a couple months ago, and their goal is to give a voice to the bettors on a prediction market industry. They feel that there's too many conflicting voices of the people that want to stop it, the people that are for it, and quite frankly, the bettors don't get a voice. We call them traders, but you and I both know we're bettors, and the people that signed up to be involved in this on an advisory scope are some of the best that are out there. My friend Rufus, but beyond him, Shane Sigsby, John Schilling, who is Golden Pants and has a wonderful podcast of his own, David Hill, who I think is a great voice for people, Isaac Rose Berman, who's just brilliant in everything that he does at such a young age. So there's a lot of great people involved in this, and we're kind of finding our way. We're kind of seeing exactly what we want. So we put together these 9 tenets of what we feel are our base level platform, and people that read them, if they go to sportstraders.org, people that read them can probably agree with that and say, okay, that's the fundamental fairness that we want for everyone. And we're hoping that the prediction markets also read them and agree to them. And we have that base level and build from there. And then, there's going to be plenty of times when people need to write a letter or call somebody about an issue. And we want to be able to direct them where they need to go to do that. Because right now, finding that source of information isn't as easy for somebody who wants to get involved.
It was just a case where prediction markets are at right now, where the community of people like-minded with you coming from the timing just sort of felt like this is coming together to where it's time to not I don't know if we officially can use the word unionize, but, sort of come together with a project like this. The timing just kind of fell right at this point into the prediction market era.
There's always strength in numbers, so let's coordinate and get together and find our strength in numbers for people who are using these platforms and want to continue to use these platforms. And yes, I think the time is right for it. One of the mistakes so Rufus and I wanted to create the American Bettors Coalition back in 2020. Great plan. We had the 501c3 filed. We had a board of directors. We just needed funding. And so in February of 2020, we set out to get funding. You know what happens next. And pretty much by September of that year, we were kind of tossing in the towel on the whole thing. And one of the mistakes that we realized at the time was 2020 was too late for the budding phase of sports betting, regulated state sports betting. That was 2018. So this time, at least, we're in the early innings of prediction markets, and hopefully we can have a little bit more influence this time.
You've already mentioned sort of the nomenclature of traders and that they're really bettors. This is a big thing that Jeff Edelstein likes to rant about, and I agree with him, and it sounds like you do too, that, calling it trading instead of betting. Jeff's thing, it's all gambling, call it gambling. It sounds like you're on the same page, but willing to call this the Traders Union, despite maybe some slight misgivings about that, using that nomenclature?
I am just on the advisory board. I don't have a leadership role with this. I am just there to help them kind of find their way. So it wasn't my idea from the jump. But, the thing about that, though, Eric, is the courts have defined gambling as something that has chance, consideration, and reward. And as Jeff would point out, everything these days has chance, consideration, and reward. You want to order something from Amazon? Are you sure what you ordered is going to show up? Is it going to be working? You took a chance, you paid some money, which is consideration. You got a reward when you get it. So, buying something on eBay is chance, consideration, reward, winning an auction. So these days, everything is gambling. Jeff is absolutely right. And I agree with him totally there.
Yeah, he always talks about the gamblification of everything, but, let's just rebrand it the tradification of everything and move forward.
There you go.
As long as we are plugging projects that you're involved with, there was recently what you're calling a relaunch of Unabated. What's new or different there?
Right. We did a site redesign, both for marketing reasons as well as to put in a kind of a new base level of architecture underneath everything so that we could roll out some new features and some new enhancements. Things like showing liquidity in order books for prediction markets is, a major one. In the world of AI, everyone can build a dashboard, can build a tool. So now it's less about the ingenuity of tools and more about the underlying data and reliability and, quite frankly, the data science. That's one thing that people complain about with Claude and the like, is they can't seem to get the data science correct. They tell you it's correct, but it's not actually correct. And so we know we have the people on staff who can get it correct. So that's what we're leaning more into, is more of the data and the data science. And so we have some new things rolling out ahead of the football season. We have a new odds screener. So real quick, there's an odds screen and an odds screener. So an odds screen is that big Microsoft Excel type matrix that you see on various sites. An odds screener is one where it just bubbles up the things that you should get attention to right away. You can't do as much cross industry comparison, but you can function a lot quicker. So we have a new odds screener that we're rolling out here in the next couple of weeks that I think is going to be good for maybe the top of funnel people that are just getting involved into sports betting or into prediction markets. And some of the harder core guys, the expert level stuff will still be there in the odds screen and the other tools that we have.
Right. So an odds screen type of tool, but with catered a little more to the shorter attention span, give me something immediate without having to pore over everything. Instant gratification odds screen of sorts, I guess.
The proverbial easy button.
Yes. I like an easy button in just about everything. All right. The last major topic that I want to dig into, you gave me some excellent quotes for a piece I wrote a few weeks ago about how quaint card counting seems in 2026 compared with Trump's teleprompter operator using his inside information to bet on mention markets, or an Arizona Cardinals exec perhaps leaking draft pick information. Before we get into your takes on all of that stuff going on now, you kind of stole the piece with your great quote when I asked if you'd been a card counter at some point, and you said, asking an AP if they've ever been a card counter is like asking Timothy Leary if he ever tried weed. So what is your card counting history? How did you get into it? How long did you do it before veering down other AP paths?
My abbreviated history would be I made my first trip to Las Vegas in 1998, fell in love with it, fell in love with the whole vibe of casinos. Now, mind you, I had grown up 30 minutes from Atlantic City. I'd been to Atlantic City many times before I was 21 and kind of just hung out down there. It's not the same vibe, especially not in the late 90s. You remember what Vegas was like in the late 90s. It was magical. So I was like, well, what can I do to spend more time in casinos? Like, how can I beat them? And I came up with this crap system. Yeah, it was just, it was the brain of a guy in his young 20s. But I looked further and I found card counting and found some books. And I got into that. And card counting is a gateway drug to other forms of advantage play. I was never a great card counter. I was geographically closest to Atlantic City, and the games were lousy for an up-and-coming card counter with not much bankroll. And so really it would only be when I go out to Vegas is when I'd really practice my skills. And that kind of led me to say, okay, well, what comes next? What else is there? And I found internet casinos of the early 2000s, which if you think there was a bonus rush in 2018, you hadn't seen anything from 2000, when some promos were worth tens of thousands of dollars an hour, and that's not an exaggeration. It was just a crazy time. You had the risk of, will I get paid? And sometimes you didn't get paid. Sometimes you got paid in a check drawn on some foreign bank. I may or may not have been investigated for dealings with terrorism around that time because I had a lot of foreign transactions into my accounts. Anyway, point being is I moved on from card counting onto internet casinos, then onto sports betting, then back to land casinos and some of the free play that was prevalent back when the proliferation around 2008 to 2012, when casinos were popping up everywhere, especially Pennsylvania. And it just has always snowballed from there. There's always been a what comes next. So case in point, I'm doing a lot of sports betting and along come prediction markets. That's what came next. Eventually prediction markets will dry up, and I'm already looking at what comes after prediction markets. And I think there will be another loophole coming down the road here in around 2030 that everyone will be taking advantage of.
On the card counting front, I'm just curious, were you always a solo card counter, or did you ever sort of work together with people on that?
I was a solo card counter. I did start to work with other people when I got into hole carding, which is the practice of trying to see the dealer's hole card in blackjack or other carnival games, and that usually requires a team approach. If you want to kind of get into that, there's an excellent book coming out in October from my friend Gina Fiore. It's called Advantage Player. And it goes into her entire career and life of being an advantage player. And really, she goes into some incredible detail about how those plays work, things that have never been written before. I read an advanced copy of that book. I couldn't put it down. It was pretty amazing. So if anyone listening has that sort of like, what's that like? This would probably be the best way to get inside the mind of an advantage player. And it's fascinating. And it comes out the end of October.
All right. I think you just gave me an idea for a podcast guest to book for around the end of October. But all right. So these modern digital-based advantage plays that we're starting to see, if we could call them advantage plays, I guess, it's people getting an edge. I'm curious what you condone and what you don't as an edge seeker. Is it okay to get info about a Cardinals draft pick if you have a friend willing to give it? Is it okay to use inside info when betting peer-to-peer in a prediction market, or do you view that differently when it's peer-to-peer rather than against the house? Where do you draw the line on these sort of things?
So, the SEC and the CFTC draw the line at non-public material information. However, in a prediction market, is there ever really any insider trading? And this is a controversial thing to say, but quite frankly, somebody putting their money into a prediction market should move the truth meter. And if enough money gets in moving the truth meter, it should reflect what the prediction will be. I'm not a fan of Trump's teleprompter guy or the guy that made $400,000 on the raid of Venezuela or any of that stuff. I'm not a fan of that. I'm just saying logistically and legally, there really can't be inside information if the whole market is driven by information and inside or outside. So non-public material information, that's where the real crux of it is. And at what point does that become a factor? So with draft picks, there is a situation where somebody knows the answer somewhere. Is that non-public? Technically, it is non-public, but it's public among them. And when we get into sports betting, we get into the whole idea of courtsiding. And, somebody that's getting into doing things faster than you. I'll give you a very quick example. The other day, I'm betting on a first inning line, and it's between innings. It's a Phillies game. I'm watching it on local television, and Kyle Schwarber is walking up to bat. He's leading off, and I'm like, okay, I got to take my bet down. And it disappeared. And 4 seconds later, Kyle Schwarber swings at the first pitch and pops it up in foul ground, and he's out. And people saw that were at the stadium on a faster feed and, knew to grab all of the, whatever that side of the first inning. And there's a lot of bots out there that are doing that are grabbing the information as quick as they can get it. And people are making a ton of money doing it. That is not insider trading. That is not non-public information. They're just getting it faster than me. I got to deal with that. Either I got to buy tickets to the game, I got to build my own bot that can, scrape all the money off the screen real fast. It's just a race at this point. And if you're competing in a race that you're just too slow to run in, that's your fault, not the race organizer's fault.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that's sort of the central question would just be, should people just be avoiding markets where that's a different sort of example, the courtsiding, where it's getting the information sooner, but just in general, where you're potentially risking money on something where the people you're against may know something. There are factual answers to the questions involved. Is it just kind of foolish to put money into any market where you could be the sucker because someone else could have information you don't?
Absolutely. And this all ties back to what I think is one of the fundamental things that we need more of in this industry: education. People need to know what they're putting their money into. People need to understand how these markets work, how the things that they don't know could be known by somebody else before they know them. Understand what's involved in these stakes and how to bet, whether it be on a regulated state sportsbook or a federally prediction market or offshore. They need to know. And unfortunately, I met with this Colorado regulator, and he had no idea who I was. He had never heard of me, never seen any of my videos. Sent him a link to some of the videos because, Eric, when I make those videos, I'm making it for the entire world of sports betting, both the low-level bettor, the high-level bettor, and especially the regulators. And if the regulators don't understand the education tenet of this entire market, they're really doing a disservice to their constituents.
If only I knew of a site that we could point people toward where they could become better educated about this stuff. I suppose Unabated fills that need for some people.
Well, look, Unabated is a paywalled tool service, but all of my education, all of my content will always be 100% free. So you can read any article. I've written hundreds of articles. You can watch any video. I've done hundreds of videos, all free. And, I won't point people to Unabated. I'll point them to YouTube, youtube.com/Unabated. All my video content is up there. We put a lot of work into these videos. They are very professionally done. If people aren't watching them, I'm, too bad on them, because I try to cover every topic that people would need to know more about. And hopefully it's doing a good service. And, from walking around BetBash and having people come up to me time and time again saying, hey, you changed my life. You changed the direction of my sports betting with your videos. And that's the greatest compliment anyone could ever say to me.
Get treated like a celebrity for a few days out there, and then, like you said, come home, be a civilian again. Before I let you go, I do have to get your prediction for the Sixers in the LeBron era. Did you manage to get any futures bets in before the news? He holds up his 76ers glass and takes a sip. Did you make any bets before the news? And obviously there's not a lot of value in them now, but any good futures that you happened to jump on prior?
No. Short answer, no.
You didn't necessarily expect that he was actually going to pick the Sixers.
I didn't expect. I thought it seemed like it was going to be Miami. But here's the thing. I am one of these guys that when that sport is out of season, it's out of my mind. I don't think about baseball in the wintertime, and I don't think about basketball in the summertime. If there is basketball, I'm thinking WNBA, because that's something I would be betting on. So I'm not one of those people that's kind of trading in my mind on what's going on with the sport. And I'm also not a huge futures bettor when it comes to the NBA, because the season's so long, so you tie up the money for so long. But very interesting. Now, are you going to ask, a couple of years ago, you asked me, how many games does Joel Embiid play this coming year? And I gave you a very low number, and I always thought that was such a bad line to give you. So I actually prepared, if you were to ask me, how many games does Joel Embiid play this season? I've got a better line for you.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, I didn't ask, but I will, or you just did. So, yeah, what's your line?
55. Over or under 55 games played.
Not with a half? Come on. What kind of a market maker are you?
Right, 55 and a half.
I would take the under there for the dual reason of, obviously, he could always get injured and miss a big chunk of time. But I think that with all of the other pieces they have, most of the key players being relatively young and durable, knock wood, that they have a little more leeway to just give him as many nights off as they feel like he needs. So I'd probably go under, although if he does happen to stay perfectly healthy, then he's probably playing, what do you think, 60 to 62? I feel like both him and LeBron, they're probably going to try to give each of them about 1 out of every 4 or 5 nights off, just because they more or less can.
Well, they're starting to announce the schedule. And so far they've announced Christmas Day, the Sixers play the Lakers in LA. They've announced opening night. The Sixers are the Knicks' opponents for the banner raising. Their first home game is against Cleveland. So the league is already stacking these primetime nationally televised games for this whole LeBron show. So I think that plays into when he sits and when he doesn't as well. So if they keep stacking in all these primetime games, I think he plays a lot more.
I guess, but, for ticket buyers, if you're thinking of going to see the Sixers against the Sacramento Kings in the middle of February, don't count on seeing the entire starting lineup in there for that one.
Right. Yeah, that's a night off.
All right. Captain Jack Andrews, always a pleasure having you on Low Rollers. He already mentioned it, but I'll just say it one more time. YouTube.com/unabated is a place to see all the videos for free, and then unabated.com is the subscription site. Jack, always great talking to you. Thanks for coming on the pod again.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure.
Okay, my thanks again to Jack, one of the best in the business. Across the various eras of Gamble On and Low Rollers, he's got to be at or near the top of the table for most guest appearances. There's a reason I keep asking him back. He always delivers. So, to end the show this week, a quick Blackjack tale. I'm not sure if I've ever ended the show with a Blackjack story because, well, how often do you have a good Blackjack story? But while playing online last week, I played a memorable hand. Not an all-timer, but for me, online, probably the most memorable I've ever played. I'm dealt 2 sevens, the dealer is showing a 4. I'm pretty sure that the correct play there is to split my 7s, so that's what I do. And the first one gets dealt another 7, so I split again. That one gets a 6, not great. 13, we stand. Next one gets a 9, also not great. 16, we stand. Next one, another 7, so I split again. Now I have 4 hands going. The first of those gets another 9 for another 16. Pretty gross. We stand. And the last one gets a 4. Finally, a good card. Now I have an 11 there. Of course, gotta double down. And I get a 3. So I have a 13, a 16, another 16, and a doubled down 14. 5 units wagered, each and every one needing the dealer to bust. Again, the dealer is showing a 4. His other card is flipped over, a deuce. Next card, a 7. He has 13. Next card, a king. He busts. I win 5 units, and all is right with the world. Of course, I am a low roller, and this is online blackjack, where you can roll a lot lower than you can at a casino, so it was a fun little win, but let's just say I didn't quite win enough to buy myself a Bryce Harper cameo. And with that, until next week, this has been Low Rollers, Small Stakes, and Hot Takes.